We are on the eve of Breast Cancer Awareness Month, and today we're talking about an early cancer detection tool that folks may not have heard of.
Oh, absolutely. And this is something that everyone should listen to and understand because it's an option for them. Again, we love providing options for our patients, and this is an option that can detect much earlier than even their traditional imaging can. If you don't have your health, what do you have?
You are a functional medicine doctor.
Join us as we blend modern and ancient wisdoms to be well now.
Welcome to the Be Well Now podcast. I'm Nick, the curious patient of you, sir, Dr. Ron Dumar in Heber City, Utah. How are we doing today?
I'm doing well, yeah, and I'm a functional medicine doctor here in Heber, and I've been practicing here for about 15 years now. And I do Chinese medicine. I'm a trained Chinese medicine doctor as well. And we're just having a lot of fun. We're having a lot of fun, and we're excited to talk about thermography in Breast Cancer Awareness Month.
Be Well Now is about being well, right? And living in the present moment, being here right now. And just the fact that October is almost upon us. Why should people know about thermography? Why should they care in terms of breast cancer screening and awareness?
Well, interesting thing is that recently some of the recommendations for breast cancer screening were just altered. So they were just changed. And it used to be that you would go at around 50 years old, you'd go in, you'd start getting your mammograms for breast cancer detection. And now they've bumped that down to 40. Similarly, we have this conversely with colonoscopies for men, where they would do it around 42 and then every 5 years. But now they're recommending breast cancer imaging screenings at 40 and every 2 years after. And in some instances, some groups are recommending every year breast cancer screening. And so if you haven't ever had a mammogram, but there are certain men for certain reasons that have mammograms,
Yep.
and the breast tissue essentially it's squeezed, it's compressed, and that compression can be unnerving for some and uncomfortable and can cause some irritation to the breast tissue.
Is it dangerous? Is it possibly promoting tumors, or is that, I don't know, it just seems like a very aggressive...
There's a risk with every imaging technique. There are risks with all sorts of medical treatments. And certainly with this one, with mammograms, there is a risk to, say, increasing inflammation or irritation to the breast tissue as a result of the procedure itself, the actual physical, mechanical process of the procedure, but also from the radiation that you receive in the procedure. It's an X-ray, so you're X-raying your breast tissue. And the X-ray radiation can increase the risk for breast cancer.
That's not a hot take. That's documented.
That's fact.
Okay. Well, because we are living in a world where the mainstream Western medicine model is so dominant that I'm on board with what
Sure.
you do here, but I wonder if the skeptics are like, well, no, what is he talking about? That's
Right.
a perfectly safe procedure. So, I mean, you could address that, or we could get into thermography, because you were telling me it's non-invasive. It works, years ahead of when a mammography could detect something. Like, I'm just kind of interested in this procedure.
Yeah, well, I think it's interesting to look at and say, are there other techniques that could potentially add nuanced detection in breast cancer screening? So we're not really looking at this from thermography point of view, saying this is going to replace mammography. In the future, it may. I don't know that. I'm not pushing that. But what we're saying is that we can do even earlier screenings with zero risk for potentially leading to or causing an increased risk of cancer.
How does it work?
So the way that it works, that's a really good question, Nick. I like that. That's great.
Thank you.
So essentially, your body emits a infrared. It emits a heat signature. So all of our bodies, anything basically above absolute zero, emits a heat signature that can be picked up on with a thermal imaging camera. So there are special cameras that are utilized to be able to detect heat signatures and create essentially a heat signature map of the body. So this can be done not just for breast tissue. It's most frequently utilized for breast tissue, but it can be used for other cancer screenings as well, not just breast cancer. So essentially what it's doing is it's picking up on a heat signature. Now the question is, I guess from that is, why would there be an increased heat signature? Well, when you have inflamed tissue, inflame itself, flame, the word is in there, that indicates heat. So when we have inflammation, inflammation is indicative of heat. There's increased activity. There's increased metabolic activity. Well, when you have a cancer cell or you have a tumor, there's also increased metabolic activity. In fact, there are dedicated vessels that attach to and begin to supply them in higher demand. And we can even see as the body starts to cool itself, or as we attempt to cool the body slightly, that these special cells and vessels will continue to remain active in supplying the blood to the tumor if that's the case that they have one. So essentially, you're going to have increased activity, increased metabolic activity, increased circulation and blood flow, which that leads to increased heat.
And so the thermal map picks that up?
The thermal map is going to pick that up.
So you have a once a month screening here in your office?
Yeah, we have a screening that we do here. We offer it here in our office for our patients, where they can come, they can get thermography, they can schedule here in our office. We don't do it all that frequently, and sometimes it's every 6 weeks. It's not, but at the most we do it right now about monthly. So we have them come up, and this is essentially a team that comes up with a thermal scanner, and they set up a room. We dedicate a room for this, and we just send it out to our patients that we're providing this scanning and detection, early detection option, and they can come and get checked.
So this can detect changes in metabolic activity years before a mammography?
That's absolutely right. And one of the reasons it can pick up on it years before is because it's way more sensitive to the metabolic and circulatory changes that I was talking to you about before. When you're doing X-ray imaging, you're really looking for a lump or a mass. And so most often we're picking up on later stage cancers with a mammography, right? But this is an option where we can pick up on cancers or tumors in their very early stages. And if you pick up on something on the early stages, it's way easier to treat, and the outcomes are way better as well.
And I think if you're listening to this podcast, you're interested in preventative medicine, in what can I do before it's emergency room situation. And I made that metaphor not really intending it to actually be emergency room, but you know what I mean? Like,
oh, for sure. Yeah. It's like
the red flag.
You don't want to be going in at 40 or 50. And this is also why they moved it from 50 to 40, is because they're realizing that there are a lot of incidences of breast cancer that are occurring now in women in their 40s. And so they're wanting to capture that at an earlier rate. But it's recommending it for the entire population and then going earlier and earlier seems like, in my mind, as a natural practitioner, a doctor who espouses natural approaches to things, I would be thinking, man, is there an easier way? Is there a less invasive way? Is there a non-radiation way, or a way that we can actually detect these things potentially earlier without any of those nefarious effects, so that we don't have to increase the amount of radiation or potential exposure to radiation throughout their life?
I don't know anything about insurance and the medicine model of our current time, but I assume everything just costs money, right? So it's like, I assume this costs money to do. And so who's a good candidate for this? Who would want to spend their hard-earned money on this as it relates to, do I need to do this? Or should I just, maybe my insurance will cover the mammography? It's like, these are what things that people think about. And if you don't have your health, what do you have? And things do cost money. But I'm just thinking of that person who's like, there's so many treatments that you could spend your disposable income on. Why not just wait for the mammography at 40 versus do this early? So who's a good candidate for that? Who would you highly encourage if they were, your sister or your family member at the Thanksgiving table to try this?
Well, we do have instances of patients. It's very low, right? But we do have instances of patients who get cancers or breast cancer in their 30s. and in very rare cases, even in their late 20s, right? That can happen and does occur. So I would say, number one, who's a candidate for this? Well, if you know that breast cancer has been a part of your family history, then you're definitely, you should elect yourself into this.
Got it.
Right? And this should be kind of a regular screening for you to say, hey, let's just check on things. There's literally the risk to it. Again, all we're doing is picking up on images or thermal regulation that's coming from your body, essentially radiation, right, that your body's sending off, which is heat, right? We're just picking up on heat. So it's not it's not invasive, right? So unlike mammography, we've already talked about, that squeezes the breast tissue and emits X-rays to the breast, and through that compression, and we talked about the discomfort. It's unlike that. This is an option where it's very simple, and all you're doing is you stand and you have an imaging device, and we get a reading and a feedback on that, and then you get a series of pictures that are interpreted. Okay, and interpreted based on their heat signatures, we can determine how much is happening there, how much activity, metabolic activity, is this likely indicative of cancer? And then from that point, if there is an issue, we would say, hey, this is, you're in the clear, fine, that's one. Or we could say, hey, you know what? You should actually really go get a mammogram.
So then you'd start here, and then you'd work toward that.
Exactly. And but again, we're attempting and wanting to catch things as early as possible. The other thing is, again, the early detection, because we can catch things earlier, then we get better outcomes. And if you can identify those tumors in earlier stages, then you're going to do better that way. And so if someone's thinking, hey, I know that cancers, tumors, things like that have occurred in my family history, then you're a candidate for it. Because we can pick up on, potentially with the metabolic activity, we can pick up on these years before you're going to see it show up, oftentimes in a mammogram.
And it seems like modern infrared cameras are pretty dang good now.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, like the technology, and with this medical technology that they have, these cameras are very high tech. Absolutely. It's not just, we do have thermal scans. You can go in and do a thermal scan of a house to get different heat signatures and things like that as well. But these are even more sensitive to that light and heat wave that is coming off the infrared, essentially, that is being exposed.
I mean, talk about radiation. Like when you get an X-ray or when you go through the airport, it feels like that's just part of modern life.
Right.
What
Yes.
kind of radiation exposure are we talking about with a mammogram that you may want to opt for this first?
Yeah, so you're definitely getting lower, and the lower and lower, let's put it that way. We've minimized the amount of radiation that people are being exposed to, but there is still a risk to X-ray radiation exposure. So absolutely, that's a great question, Nick, because it's not like you're just going in there and you're blasting the body with radiation. And because of that radiation, everybody's going to be developing cancers and tumors. We're not in the early days of X-ray, right, where we were playing with chemicals and a variety of different things that also led to those cancers or tumorigenesis. But we're in a very highly sophisticated, elevated technological type of world where we can minimize, even in a mammogram, we're minimizing the amount of exposure. Okay. And that's okay. We're minimizing the amount of exposure, but now, again, we're increasing the number of times that you have to have that exposure, right? So it's all a balancing act. And I would say aim for as minimal exposure to X-ray radiation as you can. So could this potentially be an option that allows you to not have to get a mammogram as frequently after 40? Very likely. You can discuss that with your doctor as well and let them know, hey, I'm getting these, and everything looks clear, and the mammograms are uncomfortable for me. So for some people, it's like they don't like that sensation, and it does cause irritation when they have their breast tissue compressed. So if that's the type of person that you are, if you fit into that category, then absolutely I would be looking for thermogram those instances.
Anything else you want to share if they're curious to learn more? I know you have a website.
Well, yeah, we absolutely do have a website. You can look us up there. You can call our office as well.
Heber.
chwheber.com. Thanks for reminding me about that one. Yeah. And then my phone number
is in the description, by the way.
435-657-3696. Interesting thing is, a lot of people are like, well, how come, with infrared, and I was talking to a patient about this just the other day, but infrared actually moves or radiates at a non-visible wavelength. So with frequencies from the sun, like there are certain wavelengths that you can see. There's certain, like visible light usually is between 400 and 700. Okay, so nanometers. But essentially, infrared is not. It's above. It's like 700 to 1 millimeter. So it's at a much higher range, and so it's not detectable by our visible eye. We don't see it. But it's definitely something that a camera can pick up on. It's almost like sometimes you could equate it to like an aperture in a camera where you can leave it open and it can blur, or you can do it really quickly and you can, if something's moving really fast, it all looks like it's all together, right? But if you get a really, and you might know more about this than I do even, but if you change the aperture, you can actually capture it in the moment, in a still moment where it looks like a single moving unit as opposed to just the one spinning blob that it would otherwise look like. And so we're getting to the light frequency, the wavelength that is required. We're able to view that through the specialized camera imaging devices that the body is emitting in those wavelengths and those frequencies.
Okay. Anything else?
That's all I have, and we are offering that here. So if that's somebody or something, if you know somebody that might be interested in receiving this type of imaging or having early detection, taking care of themselves in a more holistic and natural way, but still wanting to act in a wise and prudent way, send them our way. Community Health and Wellness. And be well now.
Be well now, everybody.
Namaste.
Namaste.